Hello everyone and welcome back once again to a new video on the channel. Now, as fans of Formula 1, we know the sport is never far from controversy, and that extends to on-track action as well as drama off-track. From race-ending crashes to team orders and tyre dilemmas, here are some of the most controversial races in the history of Formula 1. 1982 San Marino Grand Prix. In one of the most tragic and dramatic seasons of Formula 1's long history, the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola was no different. Nelson Piquet had won the second race of the 1982 season in Brazil, with Keke Rosberg second in the Williams. However, Renault and Ferrari protested in the week leading up to the San Marino Grand Prix, arguing that the water tanks in the Williams and Brabham cars had been emptied to cool the brakes during the race, making the cars underweight. The FIA upheld the protest and banned water cooling, therefore disqualifying Piquet's win and all subsequent results. Several teams as a result boycotted the San Marino Grand Prix, leaving only teams aligned with Ferrari or the FIA, such as Alfa Romeo or Renault, or teams too poor to miss out on the sponsorship of the race like ATS, Osella and Tolman. All in all, only 7 teams lined up on the starting grid, with 14 cars starting the race. However, further drama came from the Ferrari pit lane. Gilles Villeneuve and Didier Pironi were on course for a 1-2 finish thanks to the retirements of both Renault cars. Ferrari then ordered their drivers to slow down so that the risk of mechanical issues could be minimised. Villeneuve duly slowed, however Pironi saw it as a sign that the drivers were free to race and overtook Villeneuve at the Tosa hairpin. Pironi won the race. However, Villeneuve was incredibly angry about the perceived betrayal. It started a bitter inter-team rivalry, with Villeneuve vowing that he would never speak to Pironi again. This tragically came true at the next race at Zolder in Belgium. While trying to outqualify Pironi, Villeneuve crashed heavily and was killed, while Pironi himself suffered career-ending injuries later in the season in Germany. This may have been one of the indirectly deadliest, and certainly one of the saddest, controversies in Formula 1. 1997 European Grand Prix. It was all set up to be one of the most dramatic title deciders in Formula 1 history. Jacques Villeneuve, son of Ferrari legend Gilles Villeneuve and Williams lead driver, trailed the almighty Ferrari of Michael Schumacher by a single point in the championship standings. Whoever won the race would win the World Championship, and the larger win count of Villeneuve meant that if there was a tie for points, he would beat Schumacher to the title. The race began, and a good start from Schumacher meant that he led easily for the first half of the race. However, Villeneuve was catching up, and by the time they crossed the finish line to start lap 48, Villeneuve was less than a second behind. At turn 6, Villeneuve saw his chance and sent his Williams up the inside of Schumacher's Ferrari and held the inside line. However, Schumacher wasn't about to lose his third world title and immediately turned in on the Williams car. Martin Brundle in the live commentary box immediately saw that the collision was deliberate, with Schumacher intending to win the championship by taking Villeneuve out of the race. Unfortunately for Schumacher, while the crash had terminally damaged his suspension, Villeneuve was still able to continue the race with only minor damage to the left radiator pod and battery housing. Despite being passed by the McLarens of Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard in the final laps, Villeneuve held on to third place to take the world title by 3 points from Schumacher. Schumacher was promptly disqualified from the championship standings and ordered to take part in a road safety campaign for the 1998 season. The race was also notable for being Mika Häkkinen's first Formula 1 win, with a flying Finn going on to take the 1998 and 1999 World Championship titles for McLaren. Nevertheless, the 1997 season finale cemented Schumacher, widely regarded as the greatest Grand Prix driver of all time, as a driver with an aggressive streak and a mentality of winning at any cost. 2003 Brazilian Grand Prix. This was a race that escaped many people's notice in terms of controversy, but was laden with drama both on the track and off. 3 hours before the race was due to begin, a torrential downpour flooded the circuit, causing the race start to be delayed by 15 minutes, and eventually started under the safety car with no formation lap. Visibility was highly impaired, and the insufficient drainage at the Interlagos circuit meant that several pools of standing water sat at the bottom of Interlagos' famously undulating corners. The safety car finally drove into the pits at the end of lap 8, and the race was underway. Rubens Barrichello and the Ferrari attempted to bunch up the field on the restart, but was passed by David Coulthard's McLaren going into the Senna S. Nick Heidfeld became the race's first retirement on the very same lap, when an oil leak cut off his engine. The track began to dry out, but a large river of water remained flowing on turns 3 and 7. Justin Wilson's Minardi aquaplaned across the water at turn 3 on lap 18, followed by a spectacular suspension failure on the start-finish straight from Ralph Furman in the Jordan, as he crashed into the Toyota of Olivier Panis. The safety car was brought out, but just 3 laps after the race restarted, the cars of Antonio Pizzonia, Juan Pablo Montoya and Michael Schumacher all aquaplaned at turn 3, bringing the safety car out for the 3rd time. Jos Verstappen and Jenson Button aquaplaned and crashed out of the race within 3 laps of the restart, prompting a 4th safety car on lap 33. The race remained calm until lap 44, when Mark Webber's Jaguar aquaplaned again at turn 7 and spun a full 360 degrees. He was able to carry on, but lost 3 positions and fell to 11th place. Meanwhile, David Coulthard ran wide at turn 1 of lap 45, allowing Barrichello to pass for the lead. His Ferrari, however, had a malfunctioning fuel sensor, and the car ran out of fuel despite claiming it had 12 litres left in the tank. Barrichello was therefore forced to retire from his home Grand Prix for the 9th consecutive time. On lap 54, Mark Webber lost control of his car at 150 miles an hour just before the start-finish straight, throwing debris all over the track and necessitating a 5th safety car. Under yellow flags, the leading cars of Raikkonen and Giancarlo Fisichella in the Jordan navigated the debris successfully. However, Fernando Alonso missed the yellow flag due to a discussion with Renault mechanics over the radio. He hit Webber's detached rear wheel at 170 miles an hour, struck a tyre wall and crashed into a concrete barrier with an estimated force of 60 G. The race was immediately red flagged and Kimi Raikkonen was declared the race winner for McLaren, with the FIA taking results from the lap before the red flag. However, after the race, the FIA uncovered a timekeeping error in the race standings. Because of this, the FIA instead ended up awarding victory to Fisichella, who had led the Grand Prix at the time the results were counted. It was Fisichella's first ever Formula 1 win, and the last for both Jordan and Ford engines. Raikkonen and Ron Dennis handed over the driver and constructors winning trophy at an unofficial ceremony in Imola 2 weeks after the Brazilian Grand Prix. 2005 United States Grand Prix. I'm sure that any fan of Formula 1 in the modern era will have heard of the drama and controversy surrounding Indianapolis 2005. It's one of the greatest controversies in modern Formula 1, and its effects continue to be talked about in Formula 1 today. The race weekend started normally enough, although serious crashes for the Toyotas of Ralf Schumacher and Ricardo Zonta in Friday practice were traced back to the tyres supplied by Michelin. Michelin, in response, flew in a different specification of tyres for testing. These replacement tyres suffered the same issue. It turned out that the high-speed banking of turn 13 at Indianapolis was causing the tyre damage, and unless the cars could slow down, there was no way to guarantee the safety of drivers and Michelin-tyred teams. Bridgestone, who supplied tyres for Ferrari, Jordan and Minardi, had no such problems, likely due to Bridgestone's experience in supplying tyres for IndyCar. A last-minute request for a temporary chicane to be installed on the banking was dismissed by the FIA, who declared that it would be unfair for Bridgestone teams who had actually bought working tyres. Furthermore, Indiana state law stated that any Michelin teams entering the race were subject to criminal liability laws. This meant that every single Michelin-tyred car was forced to pit at the end of the first lap, and the race started with only the 6 cars on Bridgestone tyres. With only 6 cars competing in the race, and the Ferraris of Schumacher and Barrichello so much faster than the Jordans or Minardis, the race was primarily a battle of pit strategy, with only 2 lead changes the entire race. Beer cans and water bottles were thrown from the grandstands by booing fans, who eventually left in disgust. Schumacher won the race and quietly accepted the trophy before Ferrari made a quick exit. Tiago Monteiro of Jordan, however, stayed to celebrate his first podium in Formula 1, and the first podium for a Portuguese driver. Narain Karthikeyan finished 4th in the other Jordan, scoring the first points for an Indian driver in Formula 1, while Christian Albers and Patrick Friesacher of Minardi recorded their first F1 points, finishing 5th and 6th respectively. The race garnered an immense amount of negative press for Formula 1, especially in the United States, where F1 left the country after 2007 and did not return until 2012. Michelin refunded all purchased tickets for the Grand Prix and purchased an additional 20 tickets for the 2006 US Grand Prix as compensation for angry fans. Minardi boss Paul Stoddart felt that the FIA had betrayed the trust of Formula 1 fans and called for the resignation of FIA President Max Mosley. The fallout from this so-called Indygate caused serious drops in public opinion of both F1 and the FIA, seriously damaging the international reputation of the sport for years to come. 2008 Singapore Grand Prix. It all seemed to be a fairy tale of a race. Fernando Alonso, disgraced after his fall from McLaren the year before, made his way up the field from 15th to lead after a safety car, and won the race by just 3 seconds in a midfield Renault. However, things weren't as they seemed, and the resulting fallout nearly destroyed Renault's reputation in Formula 1 for good. It all started with Alonso's teammate, Nelson Piquet Jr. After being dropped from the team following the 2009 Hungarian Grand Prix, Piquet Jr. alleged that Alonso's victory in Singapore was achieved because Renault had told him to crash out of the race, causing a safety car. The safety car had allowed Alonso, who had pitted earlier, to gain the lead as other drivers pitted under safety car or received penalties for pitting in a closed pit lane. At the time, Piquet had said that the crash was just a simple mistake. However, this was apparently no longer the case. The FIA launched an investigation into Piquet Jr.'s claims. They found that Renault had deliberately started Alonso on a low fuel load in an early pit stop strategy, seemingly premeditating the situation with Piquet Jr. Alonso himself denied any knowledge of the conspiracy, while Renault attempted to sue Piquet Jr. for making false allegations against the team, to no avail. Team director Flavio Briatore and chief engineer Pat Simons were fired by the team in a public statement 5 days before the verdict from the World Motorsport Council. Regardless, the WMSC found Renault F1, Simons and Briatore to be guilty of conspiracy. Renault's F1 license was suspended for 2 years, while Simons was banned from the sport for 5 years, and Briatore was expressly forbidden from any FIA-sanctioned event for the indefinite future. Renault lost major sponsors as a result of the scandal, including the ING Group, and were forced to sell a 25% share in the team to investment firm Gurney Capital to compete in the 2010 Formula 1 season. Piquet Jr. never raced in Formula 1 again, with Martin Brundle calling him unemployable due to his role in the controversy, and the Brazilian went on to race in NASCAR and Formula E. Simons made a brief return to the paddock in 2011 as a consultant for Virgin Racing before becoming the technical officer at Williams Formula 1 from 2013 to 2016. Since 2017, he has been Formula 1's chief technical officer. Flavio Briatore, on the other hand, has never returned to Formula 1 since. Those were my picks for the top 5 most controversial Formula 1 races. If you've got any other races you thought were controversial, then comment down below and tell me what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.